Welcome to Mima Stories to 5-6, where myth meets emotion and every tale is a journey of transformation. This is Adoria. Adoria was sitting in her room, feeling like she was seated on the needles as she listened to the person on the phone on the other side. Ria, I think I'll be taking Ethan back from you. I'm just helping you out, dear. The voice on the other end of the phone sounded young, no older than 25. You know you're not worthy, right? Adoria froze, disbelief washing over her. What do you mean by that, Jenny? She managed to whisper, her voice trembling. But before she could get an answer, the line went dead. In the dimly lit room, Adoria sat still, the phone slipping from her hand onto the bed. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting silvery patterns on the floor. Jenny's words echoed in her mind, sharp and cutting. Her hands trembled as she clutched the hem of her dress, a habit she developed to soothe herself, though tonight it brought no comfort. Could Jenny really mean to take Ethan back? Adoria's mind swirled with confusion and dread. The sound of the door creaking open startled her. Jenny strode in, her presence bold and commanding, as if she owned not only the room but the very air within it. Adoria instinctively shrank back, her shoulders hunched, her gaze fixed on the floor. Adoria stood frozen, her hands trembling as they clutched the hem of her dress. Jenny's piercing gaze bore into her, playful yet sharp like a predator toying with its prey. The air between them was thick with tension, and Adoria felt her heart beating so fast in her chest. Jenny smirked, her voice dripping with mockery. Adoria, leave this man to me. He was mine to start with. Adoria flinched at the words, her voice barely above a whisper. I know. Jenny, I know he was yours. Her eyes darted nervously, avoiding Jenny's piercing stare. But you said you didn't like him. You told me to get close to him. I didn't even want to. But I did it for you. I will always do everything for you. Jenny chuckled, a sound that sent shivers, almost playful. Oh, Adoria, always so eager to please me. Now, why don't you just do what I am telling you to do? Her tone was light, but her words cut deep. Adoria's voice trembled as she tried to explain, her tears falling silently. Jenny, please. Ethan loves me now. And I love him too. I can't give him up. I can't live without him. Jenny tilted her head, her smile widening as if she were enjoying the spectacle. Come on, Adoria. Stop being so naive. Do you really think he loves you? Do you think he'd choose you over me? Her laughter was soft, almost musical, but it carried an edge that made Adoria's knees weak. Adoria, you need to wake up. He chose you because he didn't have a choice. It's because I turned him down. So if I were you, I would have done myself a favor and left him alone. Adoria stammered, her voice barely audible. But Jenny, you said you loved Harry. You said Ethan didn't matter to you. You told me to make him fall for me, to break off your engagement. I didn't want to. But I did it because you asked me to. Please, Jenny, don't change everything now. Jenny leaned in, her mischievous grin inches from Adoria's terror-streaked face. Oh? Darling, I change the rules whenever I want. That's the fun of it, isn't it? Her tone was light, almost playful, but her eyes gleamed with dominance. Adoria's hands tightened around her dress, her voice trembling as she pleaded. Jenny, I'll do anything for you, anything. But please, don't take Ethan away from me. I can't lose him. I can't. Adoria's breath caught in her throat as Jenny's words became more chilling. I could make this easy for you, Jenny continued, her tone deceptively light. Or I could make it very, very hard. Your choice. For a moment, Adoria considered defiance, a tiny spark of courage flickering within her. Adoria's eyes blazed with determination as she faced Jenny's venomous glare. The atmosphere crackled with tension, their words heavy with hurt, betrayal, and resolve. But as she looked into Jenny's eyes, she saw no mercy, no kindness, only dominance and control. The spark faded, replaced by the familiar fear that had governed her life since the day Jenny took her in. She took a trembling step forward, her hands clutching the fabric of her dress as though it could anchor her to the ground. Her voice was shaky, but her heart refused to falter. Maybe he was yours in the beginning, Jenny, but will me leaving him make him come back to you? He had already decided. Adoria. Jenny's voice sliced through the quiet room like a whip, sharp and commanding. Adoria flinched, her heart beating so fast as she instinctively shrank back, her hands trembling at her sides. The air seemed to thicken as Jenny moved around the room, her heels clicking against the wooden floor with an air of authority. Adoria's voice was barely a whisper. Jenny, I don't. Jenny snapped, cutting her off before she could finish. Her smirk was cold, her eyes gleaming with something dangerous. I don't want to hear your excuses. I told you to get close to him, and now I'm telling you to leave him. Do you understand? Adoria's lips parted, but no words came out. Her chest tightened as Jenny stepped closer, her presence suffocating. You think Ethan loves you? Jenny continued, her tone dripping with mockery. You think someone like him could ever love someone like you? Look at yourself, Adoria. Do you even remember where I found you? The gutters. That's where you came from. If it weren't for me, you'd still be there. Adoria's hands clenched into fists at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. Jenny, please, she said, her voice trembling. You told me to. I told you to play your part. Jenny's voice rose, her words cutting through the air like a blade. Not to steal what's mine. Ethan belongs to me, Adoria. He always has. And now, because of him, you think you can stand up to me? You think you're better than me? Adoria shook her head, tears pooling in her eyes. I didn't mean to. Enough, Jenny's laughter rang out, light and mocking, as she circled Adoria like a predator. You said you'd do something for me, didn't you? Anything except this, apparently. Fine. If you won't leave him willingly, then maybe you should consider that window. She gestured toward the open window, her smile widening. It would solve all your problems. Adoria shrank back, her legs unsteady as the room seemed to close in around her. Please, don't do this, she whispered. I love him. Adoria lifted her eyes to look at Jenny, but what she saw made her freeze. What did Adoria see? And how will she be able to get out of her predicament? Continue watching my videos to know more. Continue language listening to the price of her belonging. Please subscribe such that you can be notified when the next chapter is posted.
Welcome to Mimi Stories 256. Please like, subscribe, and comment. A like means support. Let's continue with our next chapter of The Price of Her Belonging. Jenny's face was contorted in rage, her piercing glare radiating fury, every line of her expression. A warning that mercy was not an option. Adoria's breath hitched, her knees threatening to buckle beneath her. Jenny, you don't mean that, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jenny leaned in, her face inches from Adoria's. Her tone softened, but it was no less chilling. Oh, but I do. Think about his family, Adoria. What would a poor girl like you even do there? You don't belong in his world. You never did. Ethan was mine from the start. You did your part, now back off. Adoria's vision blurred as tears spilled down her cheeks. She stared at Jenny, the woman she had once idolized, the sister she had trusted. But now, all she saw was cruelty. Calculated, deliberate cruelty. Jenny straightened, brushing a strand of hair from her face as if the conversation had bored her. You have two choices, she said lightly, her tone almost cheerful. Leave Ethan or I'll make sure you lose him. And everything else you care about. Adoria's voice cracked as she tried to speak. Jenny, think it over, Jenny interrupted, turning toward the door. She paused in the doorway, casting one last glance over her shoulder. But don't take too long. I'm not a patient woman. Jenny turned and looked at her, before exiting the room as she gave Adoria a smile which wasn't a smile, a playful yet dangerous curve of her lips. You really should think about that window, she said casually, gesturing toward it. It would solve all your problems. And mine. The door clicked shut behind her, and her laughter echoed faintly down the hall. Adoria sank to the floor, her tears falling freely now. The pale moonlight streaming through the window seems harsher, illuminating the storm raging within her. Ethan, Jenny, the window. The choices felt unbearable, and yet she knew she had to make one. She couldn't help but remember the first time she met with Jenny on that fateful day. The shabby house groaned under the weight of years of neglect, its peeling paint curling like tired petals. A single flickering bulb swayed slightly in the breeze from a cracked window, casting restless shadows across the walls. On the splintered floor, 8-year-old Adoria sat pressed against the side of her mother's rickety bed. Her small hands clung desperately to the fraying blanket, her face streaked with tears. Mama, Adoria whimpered, her wide, tear-filled eyes fixed on her mother's pale, sweat-covered face. Are you sure you're okay? Her mother, Edith, gave a faint smile, though her trembling lips betrayed her struggle. She brushed a damp strand of hair from her face, her breaths shallow and uneven. I'm fine, my darling, she rasped, her voice cracking under the strain. You should sleep. By morning, I'll be good as new. Edith's words were followed by a violent cough that shook her frail body, the sound sharp and jarring. Adoria flinched, her tiny frame trembling as fresh tears welled in her eyes. But you're not fine, Mama, she said, her voice cracking. You're so hot and the way you're breathing scares me. Edith reached out a shaky hand, resting it lightly on Adoria's cheek. Her touch was warm, too warm. Don't cry, my love, she whispered, though her words faltered. I'm just a little tired. That's all. She smiled again, but it was weak, hollow. Adoria's little hands tightened around the blanket as a sob escaped her. I should call Aunt Jessica, she said suddenly, her voice rising with desperation. She jumped to her feet, darting to the door with urgency. She can take us to the hospital. Her small hands fumbled with the rusted latch of the door, her heart racing. The cool night air seeped through the edges, prickling her skin. Outside, the neighborhood was eerily silent. The cracked pavements and crumbling houses seemed to stretch endlessly into the shadows, abandoned and forgotten. The moonlight bathed the street in a pale glow, but the world beyond the doorway felt heavy, almost alive, pressing down on her. "Adoria, wait!" Her mother's weak voice broke through the stillness, stopping her in her tracks. "Dear, the people are asleep." "We can't disturb them," Edith wheezed, her coughing intensifying. "I'll be fine, I promise." Adoria hesitated, her small frame silhouetted in the doorway. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she turned back to look at her mother. Her heart ached at the sight. Edith was gasping for air, her chest rising and falling with effort. The light from the bulb flickered erratically, making her mother's fragile frame appear even more ghost-like. Adoria's resolve snapped. "No!" she cried out, her voice breaking. "You're not fine, Mama. You're lying. I can't let you die." Her sobs burst forth, raw and heart-wrenching, piercing the suffocating quiet of the night. They reverberated through the walls, trembling with her fear and desperation. Edith closed her eyes, her heart heavy with guilt, as her daughter's cries echoed like a plea she couldn't ignore. With a deep, pained breath, she forced herself to sit upright. Every movement was agony, her body screaming in protest. But she couldn't bear to see her little girl in such pain. "All right, my stubborn girl," Edith said, her voice trembling with exhaustion but laced with determination. "We'll go." She reached for the edge of the bed, using it to steady herself as she stood. Her knees buckled slightly, but she held firm, her love for Adoria giving her strength. "We'll find help." Adoria ran to her mother's side, wrapping her tiny arms around her. "Thank you, Mama," she whispered through her tears, her voice trembling with relief. As the two stepped into the night, the air felt heavier, colder. The streets stretched before them, deserted and uncaring. But Adoria's small hand was clasped tightly in her mother's. Together, they began the slow, uncertain walk toward the faint hope of salvation, each step a battle against the weight of the darkness surroundings. The mother and daughter stepped out into the chilling night, the little girl clutching a small bag of essentials, while her mother dragged her feet, each step a slow, labored effort. Adoria's heart ached as she trailed a few paces behind, watching her mother's frail form struggle forward. The old dirt road stretched endlessly before them, shrouded in darkness except for the faint glow of the moon. Adoria glanced at the distant horizon, wishing for something, anything that could bring hope. "Adoria!" her mother rasped, her breath shallow and uneven. "Come sit close, my dear. The cold, it's too much." Adoria quickly dropped the bag and hurried to her mother's side. Her small hands reached for her mother's trembling ones, holding them tightly as they both sank to the ground by the roadside. "I'm fine, Mom," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "Don't worry. Someone will come. Someone will really come." She repeated the words, her tone more like a prayer than a statement, as though trying to convince herself just as much as her mother. A faint smile tugged at the corners of her mother's pale lips. "You always have hope," Edith murmured weakly, her voice laced with pride despite the strain. "Never lose that, my love. Let it always be the adrenaline that drives you." The sentence ended in a fit of coughing that racked her frail body, leaving her gasping for air. "Stop talking!" Adoria interrupted, her voice breaking with emotion. "Don't say things like that. You're staying with me, okay? I don't need anything else." Her gaze darted nervously to the road as she added, barely above a whisper, "Just one car, please. Just one car. Stop for us." The older woman's hand reached up weakly to touch her daughter's cheek. "Come on, dear," Edith said, her voice broken but still trying to soothe. "You've done your best. If no car comes, it's not your fault. Stop it!" Adoria's voice was sharper than she intended as she swiped at her tears. "Stop saying such things, Mom. We are not giving up." Her small hands clenched into fists. "Someone will stop. They have to. They just have to." For a moment, the only sound was the rustling of leaves in the cold night air. And then faintly, the rumble of an engine reached Adoria's ears. Her head shot up, her heart leaping with renewed hope. "There's a car," she exclaimed, scrambling to her feet. She shaded her eyes with her hands, squinting down the road. "Mom, it's another car." But as the headlights pierced the darkness, Adoria's breath hitched. The car wasn't slowing down. It was speeding straight toward them. "Thank you for sharing this moment with me. If this story stirred something in you, a like or a comment goes a long way. And subscribing means you'll never miss the next chapter. Until then, stay gentle, stay curious, and keep the stories close. Welcome to Mimi Stories 256. Please like, subscribe, and comment. A like means support. Let's continue with our next chapter of The Price of Her Belonging. There's a car. Mom, there is another car, Adoria exclaimed, scrambling to her feet. She shaded her eyes with her hands, squinting down the road. Mom, it's another car. Edith gave her a weak, reassuring smile, though deep in her heart she doubted. Don't get your hopes up, dear, she said gently. People, they have their own lives. They're busy. But what about us? Adoria thought bitterly, but she didn't speak the words aloud. She stood rooted to the spot, watching as the sleek black car sped closer, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Her breath caught as she waved her arms desperately, her small figure illuminated in the beam of the lights. Please, she whispered, her voice trembling. Please stop. The car didn't slow. Instead, it sprinted past them, leaving a cloud of dust and despair in its wake. Adoria collapsed to the ground, her knees scraping against the rough dirt as tears streamed down her face. Why won't they stop? She cried, her voice cracking. Can't they see us? We're right here. What do we have to do, scream? Her mother reached out, her trembling hand resting on Adoria's shoulder. Don't lose your hope, my love, she said softly. Though her own voice was weighed down by exhaustion, sometimes people just can't stop. Adoria buried her face in her hands, the frustration and desperation overwhelming her. Her mother's words, though kind, didn't ease the ache in her chest. This road was deserted, this hour unforgiving. No public transport would be running. And the personal cars that passed seemed to carry passengers too, preoccupied with their own lives to notice them. But just as despair began to tighten its grip around them, the sharp screech of tires tore through the silence. Both mother and daughter froze, their heads snapping up in unison. The black car, which had passed moments ago, was reversing back toward them. Adoria gasped, her heart racing as she turned to her mother, clutching her arm tightly. They're coming back, Mom, she said, her voice filled with disbelief and hope. They're coming back! Edith's lips parted slightly in a weak smile, though her face was pale and drawn. She squeezed her daughter's hand gently, her own hope flickering to life for the first time in hours. Together, they watched the car approach, its headlights cutting through the darkness like a beacon. In the quiet of the car, the young girl's voice broke the silence. Dad, did you see that? I think I saw a ghost, a girl standing by the road. Before her father could reply, the older woman answered sharply, her tone unwavering. No, darling, there are no ghosts, she said, reaching over to lovingly rub the girl's hair, as if soothing her imagination away. But I saw it, the girl insisted, her voice growing louder with conviction. Her little head turned quickly, looking from her mother to her father with wide, questioning eyes. You saw it too, right? Her father chuckled softly, shaking his head as he kept his eyes on the road. No, my princess, that wasn't a ghost, it was just a young girl. A young girl? The child's brows furrowed in surprise, her voice trembling with concern. What is she doing out there in the dark all alone? She fidgeted in her seat, her face etched with worry. Shouldn't we stop to help her? The older woman straightened, her voice hurried and clipped. No, dear, she said firmly, her hands folding across her lap. Maybe it's a trap. Bad people sometimes use children to lure you out of your car. And when you stop, they hurt you. The little girl froze, unsure, before glancing again at her parents. Mom? The woman and the man echoed at the same time, glancing at the older woman. The young woman beside her glanced again toward the older woman and spoke. No, dear, maybe you're right, she said cautiously. Maybe she really did need help, but we've already passed her. The child's father exchanged a glance with his wife, his lips tightening as he considered the thought. The woman and her husband were not scared of stopping to help the girl. Their car wasn't alone. They had an escort vehicle trailing behind them. Still, they drove on, leaving the figure behind. The older woman, the grandmother, sat silently. She wasn't afraid, nor concerned about traps. Her voice, though calm, carried an air of indifference. She simply didn't like the idea of poor people getting too close to her family. To her, stopping was unnecessary. The car continued to hum softly as it sped down the dark road. Inside, the little girl wasn't having it. She shifted in her seat, pressing her face to the cold glass of the window. The world outside was quiet, shadows stretching across the deserted street under the faint glow of streetlights. Mom, the girl whispered, turning her head, her voice trembling. What is she doing out there alone? What if something bad happens to her? Her mother barely glanced at her, exchanging a look with the older woman seated beside her. The older woman, the grandmother, gave a pointed glare to the young mother before speaking firmly. No, dear, I don't think it's right to stop, she said. Her voice clipped and authoritative. She might be with the bad guys. These things happen, you know. They use children to trick people, and before you know it, you're in trouble. The girl's lips trembled, her small hands clutching at her dress as tears welled in her eyes. She turned away from her mother and faced her grandmother directly, her gaze wide and pleading. "But Grandma," she said softly, her voice shaking as emotion bubbled up. "What if she's lost? What if she's trying to find her parents? What if—" She paused, her voice breaking. "What if I was the one beside the road, and people just drove by me?" Her words hung heavy in the air, an unspoken challenge piercing the grandmother's composure. The older woman's face hardened for a moment, her lips pressed into a thin line. But as her granddaughter's tear-filled eyes searched her for answers, she felt the weight of guilt pressing down on her. She couldn't bear the thought of being seen as the villain in her grandchild's innocent eyes. Her expression softened slightly, though her tone remained firm. "Go back," she ordered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who rarely admitted fault. The driver nodded, his hands gripping the steering wheel as the car tires screeched in protest. The sudden halt jolted everyone inside, their expressions shifting to a mix of surprise and unease. As the car reversed down the empty road, behind them, the escort vehicle followed suit, its headlights casting eerie shapes across the dilapidated buildings lining the street. As they slowed near the spot, the girl leaned forward, her tiny face pressed against the window once more. The figure was still there, a young girl no older than she herself. She stood motionless in the shadows, her arms crossed, tightly over her chest as if shielding herself from the night's cold. Her face was barely visible, but the slight quiver of her shoulders betrayed her fear. Inside the car, the grandmother's lips pressed tightly together, her knuckles whitening as she gripped her handbag. The little girl whispered, "See, Grandma, she needs us." But the older woman stayed silent, her expression unreadable. The faint sound of the young girl's uneven breathing mixed with the low hum of the vehicles, creating a tense pause that stretched into the night. Thank you for sharing this moment with me. If this story stirred something in you, a like or a comment goes a long way. And subscribing means you'll never miss the next chapter. Until then, stay gentle, stay curious, and keep the stories close.